Jeff Cramer, welcome back to Out of the Hourglass. How are you this morning?
Great. Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great. I always love a returning guest. So, if our listeners have been listening for a while, they've heard you speak before. For those who went to the Grand Summit and attended a sales session, they probably saw you as well. You're a sales peer group coach here, you're a sales coach. But for those listeners who haven't had the pleasure of either listening to your past work or meeting with you or working with you, can you just give us a quick reminder of who you are, what you do, and where you're from?
Yeah, sure. From Columbia, Missouri but I travel nationally and just have loved sales for a very long time. Really like the art of it,
Hmm.
as well as the science of it. I work with salespeople, sales managers on identifying where they're strong and then also trying to put plans specifically to improve where they can.
We've had a lot
Love
of,
the art.
yeah, we've had a lot of our clients work with you who really enjoy that one-on-one time. And obviously your peer group. We've heard great things about your peer group as well. So you
Thank
love what
you.
you do, but it also it's reflected by the people who have worked with you, which is always great. I think this was in December. We're talking about doing a podcast, and there was a topic that came up that you're like, I've seen this. I think we need to dive into this. And I think it's a good one, especially as we think about where we are. This is coming out in February. It's a little bit slower times for a lot of our reps. So this is the time to really kind of be thinking about your approach, especially as we get into busier seasons. There's a problem with autopilot selling where we're just going in and doing the same thing over and over again. How have you identified this? How have you seen this? What does it look like when a sales rep is just running on autopilot versus being really strategic about their approach in each estimate opportunity?
When I look at strategy versus tactics, I really believe that that's the number one cause of business failure is a lack of strategy. I think there's a lot of people that just do, they don't
Mm-hmm.
think, and they let precedent substitute for thought. They just keep doing the same things over and over. You've heard the definition of insanity, doing the same
Yeah.
things over and over and expecting a different result. It happens when people are trained to follow a script. I guess that's one of the things that puzzles me. I've worked with teams that have had leaders or salespeople say, just tell me what to say and I'll say it. They're really looking for a script rather than really problem solving. And I think that's what I see the most of is autopilot when you're just doing things because you've always done them, just tasks, actions that are really not aligned to a strategy.
Do you think this also can happen when people just kind of shallowly or don't go deep into following the sales process? So like it's great to have a sales process, right? The sales process is a tactic, it's kind of giving you tools in a sense, but just to follow that without kind of going deep in those areas, that's where is there a misconception there? Like of not doing the sales process to its fullest?
Oh, I think there can be. Sure. I think
Yeah.
the sales process can be a crutch, but it still requires thought. You don't just go through things because you've been trained to do them. If you don't think, there may be a time in a sales process where you don't follow a process, but it can be a strategic reason as to why you don't. It's
Yeah.
fine. But if you just don't even think about it, it can be detrimental to your ultimate goal.
What is at stake here when you're just taking a tactical approach to all your bids? What's at stake for the rep and why should owners care that there's a difference here? Like why should an owner even care to listen to an episode like this where you want to dive into the differences between tactical selling and strategic selling?
There's a big difference, and it's accountability. Management has to be the ones to hold the reps accountable for problem solving thought, to not just go through rotely the process. It's kind of a lazy way of doing things if you just follow a script or a process without requiring thought.
Yeah.
Because it's that thought that differentiates you. And it also sets you up for predictability. If I'm a competitor and I know the approach you're always going to take, I know the way you always handle things, it's easier for me to develop a plan to win against you.
Let's dive in a little bit to kind of what tactical selling looks like so we can kind of give some examples here versus the
Mhm.
strategic selling. But actually, before I do that, a question. Have you ever worked with a sales rep or a sales manager who has just said to you, tell me what to say, Jeff, and I'll do it. And what has your response been?
Well, first of all, I absolutely have had that.
Yeah.
And I guess my response, first of all, it's different for every instance. It's not always the same, which goes back into problem solving and thinking through things. But I guess what I've asked is, what are they trying to achieve? What's their goal? What's their objective? Because if their actions, you can tell them what to do, but if it doesn't align with a strategy, and we can get into specifics of a strategy, let me go ahead and choose one.
Mhm.
One of the strategies that I've been identifying with a sales team is, let's say they want to dominate, pick a housing development, the Highlands. Let's say they want to dominate the Highlands zip code area. They want to be the number one painter in that high-end zip code. Well, if that's the strategy and they're asking what it is they should say, I want to make sure that the things that they're currently implementing align with that strategy. If it doesn't align, then it's just noise.
It's one thing to say it, to say what you want, but then to actually take the actions, to do it. All right, let's talk about tactical selling, because I think that this will resonate, just some of the behaviors here. When you're working, whether it's with someone who's selling in landscaping, remodeling, a painting company, what are some common tactical patterns that you have seen as a sales coach?
Well, tactics are obviously number of calls made, number of follow-ups, number of leads, number of bids made. Those are very measurable tactics.
Doing it just to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's fine. You need to have those.
Yeah.
But if all you're doing is implementing the same things that you've always done, there's a term called tactical fatigue. And that's what happens. You just keep doing things. And what ends up happening are your high volume, but low profit. You're not really identifying opportunities that are going to be the best to pursue.
I could see that happening where, whether it's a business owner or a sales manager, they're tasking their reps with doing this many outbound calls a day, and there's no discussion on the strategy or the approach to it. They just got numbers to call. And that becomes like, what's the point here? What's the purpose? We know we're trying to get, to either schedule an estimate, try to win a bid, but a list without a larger overall strategy feels the why is gone, in a sense. Is that accurate?
It is. And what you do is you end up having high volume. That's fine, but the bids are low quality. And if that's the case, ultimately you end up competing on price. And nobody wants to do that. You don't have an opportunity to differentiate yourself on a market that you want to own.
So tactical selling is just like, to me, it sounds like doing the behaviors you think you're supposed to do or that you've been asked to do because, sometimes they work. They're metrics that we can measure, and it's just how things have always been done in order to get the bid.
Yeah, and here's a real danger, Molly, is that if you've had success in implementing those tactics, it just serves to reinforce a behavior that you're going to get stuck with when market conditions change, and they will.
Yeah.
You're still doing the same things and you're continuing to do them because you've been successful previously.
Without realizing that the environment has now changed and those tactics may no longer apply anymore.
Correct.
So what you coach to is the strategic selling approach. And
absolutely.
When we say that, how do you define a strategic selling approach?
It is a higher level. The strategy is the thought. It's the GPS, I guess, where it is you want to go. The how is the tactics.
Okay.
So strategy
you need both ultimately.
Ultimately, you absolutely need both.
But the failure is only doing the tactics and not bringing in kind of the partner here of the strategy. Okay. All right. I interrupted you, but continue on.
Oh, no, that's okay. As I said, it's the GPS. It's the what, tactics are the how. So to that example, when I mentioned earlier, let's say, and this is a brainstorming thing that would be beneficial for companies to take on. What are the strategies that we want to try to achieve this year? We want to dominate this neighborhood. We want to partner with complementary companies that are either in the business before us or out of the business after we are. So you just want to partner. So then you talk about who are the partners. Then you start looking at how do you make that happen? So if I want to dominate a neighborhood, that becomes my strategy. Then I start listing out the tactics that I need to employ to make that happen. But strategy has to be the beginning.
So there needs to be kind of overall kind of company sales team strategy. Mm-hmm. But then does there also need to be do sales reps personally need to have a strategy for their own approach to going into jobs?
I think it can roll that way for sure. So if the company has a strategy and then tactics, the tactics at the corporate level or the company level can actually become strategies of the individual person. That's kind of how that rolls.
Okay. Do you have a framework or a checklist or a tool that you use to help reps kind of prepare strategically about going into certain bids? And we can keep the Highlands as an example. Highlands has become a place that a company wants to dominate. There's tactics that the company has decided on that need the approach. But now these reps, they now have the opportunity they're working the opportunities. Is there a framework that they should be going in with to be prepared to deploy those tactics in a way that match the strategy?
Yeah, I mean, we can work on frameworks. They're going to be different by market. They're going to be different by company in terms of what resources they have, but you need to identify the gaps. So yeah, we can come with a template. I'm actually in the process, as you mentioned that, of creating one that we can facilitate and deliver. But there is a checklist, but it has to be thought process is what it's guiding. So for example, what's the advance I'm seeking in an opportunity? And then you try to anticipate and you do an internal role play, if you will, planning what if. So it's all about having some things that you want to make sure happen and then anticipating what you're going to encounter and then doing an internal role play as to what your response is going to be.
Are you, as a sales coach, are you big on pushing role play exercises within teams?
I love that. I do.
Yeah.
And, it's funny. We've done a lot of role plays before. And what always happens is people agonize over that as much as anything. They don't care to do it. But after it's over, they say it was one of the most effective things they've done. So role plays are really beneficial. And
Why do you
it's
think it's
funny.
so
Years
uncomfortable?
ago when I did one, I remember when I was at a company and I did role play and I ultimately went to call on this very large customer that I was preparing for. And it was so funny. It was hard not to laugh because they actually did say what we had talked about in the role play. So I thought that
So
was
it
kind
was
of
like,
cool.
yeah, it felt like you were fully prepared because you had just done this for
Yes.
practice.
Yes. So I'm sorry.
Um,
What was your question?
no, that's a nice kind of full circle moment. Like this is why role plays matter because you're really intentionally thinking about like what could possibly come from this conversation. Especially like sales reps who tend to be a little bit more extroverted, kind of, a bit more dominant in their personality, don't tend to be afraid to be in social settings. Why do you think the role play exercise is an uncomfortable activity?
Role plays can be stressful because there's a feeling it's a setup to just catch you doing things wrong. And it's quite the opposite. I think what you need to do is look at role plays as an opportunity to catch people doing things right and reinforce that. Have others listen to it and say, oh, that was good. I think I may try that. There's no doing anything wrong. There's ways to do things better. Now, that's a fine line, but I think in role plays, it's important to note that you want to really
Yeah.
reinforce the things you're doing well and identify, okay, if I had that role play to do all over again, what might I try to do differently? It's not about doing things wrong.
It's a good way for reps to kind of really test how they would adapt to or need to adapt kind of their tactics per se to in an appointment to what they're seeing and hearing. So you go in with a plan, you go in with the strategy, and you're deploying the tactics that that you guys that has been decided upon. But then you learn different things on that appointment, and you need to pivot. I feel like role plays could be really helpful in those scenarios. Like, what are all the possible things? What are the possible avenues that this conversation could go down?
It does. It does help you anticipate and more effectively problem solve.
Let's talk about some just like examples in general and how kind of reps need to approach different, situations. Because we've got reps on here or who are listening to this who are, commercial property, commercial reps. They've got residential reps. And the approach to a commercial property manager versus a residential homeowner is very different. For a rep kind of going into a bid for either one of those projects, the rep's doing different things. How do you see that approach differ?
Commercial versus residential?
Yeah.
Well, back to strategy. If dominating a home development, the HOA may be one of your tactics that you want to launch in order to be more effective in dominating that particular zip code. So then you need to get into how do you work with an HOA? What can you do to, I don't know, maybe trade profit margin for high volume recurring work? Maybe that's part of your strategy is to appeal to the HOA more by accepting that. That's something that the company needs to talk about and embrace. That would be the case in a home HOA, maybe in the commercial business. Maybe you want to spend time on total cost of ownership. So you compare a cheap bid to a high bid, and you have to really identify what's the total cost of ownership, professional quality versus low quality. Looking at a 10-year period, what's going to cost more? I think businesses tend to maybe look at that more. So if you have a paint job that's going to last 3 to 4 years and you have to redo it versus one that's going to last longer, has a better quality, eliminating wood rot. So there's things that you need to look at to build out a total cost of ownership. Maybe that's the strategy that you employ with a business. So you just need to think about what's going to be of interest to them And then
Hmm.
you go back to it's not just having that and then leading with that. You need to ask questions that develops a need in the mind of the customer that total cost of ownership is important to me. Because if you just volunteer all of this, it's not the same as if you ask questions to have them ultimately say, I really need to pay attention to what the overall costs are going to be in 10 years. So asking questions that develops that need is much more effective to implementing your strategy.
Asking questions and listening is one of the things that when I sat in on the sales fundamentals workshop last year when you were one of the co-facilitators, there was such an emphasis and recognition from a lot of the attendees. They just don't ask enough questions. They assume a
Mhm.
lot of things. They listen. They're listening, but not. They're not peeling back like that next like layer that
Exactly.
could give them the opportunity.
And when
And
you're
I
implementing these strategies, it's back to making sure that you're aligned. If you're talking with and asking questions and you identify that pricing is a real issue and they don't care about total cost of ownership. If when you're pursuing an opportunity and the deal doesn't align with the stated strategy that you have, it's just noise. You need to walk away.
That's hard sometimes, though, when,
Very.
reps are goal-oriented people and they've got quotas to hit. It's hard to walk away from an opportunity. I mean, you think, "Oh, I think we'll be able to make this work for them."
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, who
that's,
are you setting up for failure in that case? Not only you may be focused on just getting the win,
yeah,
but if profit margin is eroded, if you're holding your delivery team, your staff accountable for services that they're not used to, that it's lower standard, that sets them up for failure also. So you need to think about the
yeah.
whole team.
That's that sales kind of production dynamic where it really comes down to, sales needing to set up the production team for success. It also
Yes.
reminds me of a podcast I just did with Eric McDonald over at CHP Painting in Cheyenne, Wyoming, where he puts kind of like every job through a Venn diagram, kind of three things that are, most important to his company, culture being one of them. And if that bid does not fit that Venn diagram, they walk away
Love
because
it.
he says it can hurt, revenue because you're turning away jobs. But he said, but ultimately my culture is more important than that. And by doing
Mhm.
this, then we're getting the best jobs that my team is really happy with, that the customers are really great folks, both, commercial and residential. But he really filters through what jobs they're going to take on.
That's great. I think that management involvement is necessary.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
you think about that is managers really play a significant role in this strategic mindset. How do they get reps to change their habits? It's through accountability. You
Hmm.
inspect what you expect. You've probably heard that term before. And that means you need to be involved. You can't just trust that it's all going to take place. That's what metrics are for. That's what accountability is for. You inspect what you expect and you measure that. And
So
a
this,
manager can also, when they're pursuing a deal, like if they're going through the pipeline, if a rep is pursuing opportunities, I would ask for this opportunity. It looks like a good opportunity. What strategy does that align to? If it
mm,
doesn't align to one of our strategies, it's noise.
do you see this often more, the noise component come in more on the side of like prospecting and business development versus kind of inbound leads that are maybe responding to marketing based off of strategy that's been decided upon? Like oftentimes those are a little bit more predictable, that they're kind of in line with the strategy because they're in response to marketing behaviors versus the prospecting biz dev side where you're going out to fish and part of that is filtering what are the right opportunities.
Yeah, that's kind of all over the board.
Okay.
I've had development teams that ask more questions than others to try to identify what the opportunity is, to get some inkling as to are they going to want a high quality? Are they going to accept high quality? Or are they just calling around to get the cheapest bid? If I can identify that, that helps. A lot of times the development company won't. They just throw leads out because they're measured by volume. They
Mm-hmm.
don't care. And this is some. I'm not saying all,
Yeah.
but some of the times it's just about high volume. So look how many leads I sent over this week. Well, yeah, there were some, a lot of $1,200 jobs with 5% profitability or whatever. I mean, you've got to measure that as well.
Yeah.
So it really is all over the board as to what I've seen.
Something that's kind of coming to my realization here, now that recognizing that the strategy side of this really comes kind of top down. This is the responsibility of the sales manager or the owner if they're wearing the hat of the sales manager to kind of like really set the tone on what it is. I mean, and obviously using the sales team brainstorming together, but they set the tone for that accountability of those strategies. When you are coaching one-on-one sales reps, does it reflect how important it is for you to understand kind of where that rep is coming from, have a conversation with the sales manager, have a conversation with the business owner, either at the forefront or in the middle of coaching so that you understand, one, kind of the needs of this rep that you're working with, but also like what the company strategy is so that you can help coach this rep to be able to deploy the strategy correctly?
That would be phenomenal insight. I don't always have it. I will ask for that. There's a lot of times that thought is not given to that.
Mm-hmm.
That the company as a whole is just doing things the way they've always done, and they've got actions that they measure by back to these metrics. But this is the time of year where sales planning and strategic planning and corporate planning must take place, and thought has to have gone into that. So, but what a great tool that is for me to coach by. If I know
Yeah.
what the company's strategy is and I talk with the salespeople about what their approach is, what their individual planning is. And as I said a minute ago, a lot of times the corporate tactics become the salesperson's strategy, and then they flesh out that strategy with a lot more tactics. But gosh, knowing that would be phenomenal. For me,
Yeah.
yes.
We should start encouraging more of that with any of the sales coaching that we do, where you must require a call with the business owner or the sales manager so that you are kind of setting up the coaching for success and for the company for success. Ultimately, we want every rep that we work with that you coach to be set up for success, to do their job within the goals of the organization.
Sure, a conversation or a documented sales plan.
It also kind of brings in just the role of the sales manager and how important this role is, and the coaching kind of mindset that they have to have. Sales manager is not just about making sure that reps are going out and doing their bids and
Mhm.
they're there for problems, but it's kind of coaching them through situations and holding them accountable. And that sales manager role isn't always talked about enough, I don't think.
It's a very hard role.
Yeah.
When you think about a challenge that they face, and I remember when I was in sales leadership, faced it regularly. You've got a
Mm-hmm.
rep that's successful and they've always been doing things a certain way. And here you are talking about changing their behavior. And they're saying, well, I don't need to change. I've always done it this way and I'm successful. Tough call. So,
Yeah.
so in that instance, you don't train anybody. They don't need training. They know what to do, but you need to spend time developing and earning the right to talk about a different way of doing things and trying to highlight the value of doing such. Tough
Hmm.
job.
Do you think that's the most common resistance in general with sales and sales training? Is that I'm getting the bids, I'm hitting quotas. What else? And I don't need to do any more development.
What's in it for them to change?
I mean, you as
But
a
of
salesperson yourself, now a sales coach. I mean, you understand that there's you never completely hit mastery, right?
course not.
Yeah.
And spending time, investing time to change and to experience individual growth, you really need to look at what's in it for you. And
Yeah.
and that becomes a strategy. I mean, we talk about strategy, gosh, that's kind of the ultimate strategy for a sales manager is what's my strategy to achieve individual salesperson growth? And then
Hmm.
what are my tactics to make that happen? So the same thought process needs to occur there.
Yeah. Does this topic ever come up, this sales versus strategy, or kind of just selling on autopilot? Do you see this come up a lot often in your peer group when you're meeting with different reps?
Yes, actually, we have come up with that. As a matter of fact, what we're doing right now is we'll be doing our second call on sales strategy, on the
Mm-hmm.
annual sales strategy, and the definition or the differences between strategy and tactics is I don't know if it's not known, or it's just not discussed enough. Or there's no time to think about it. We're experiencing that right now on our peer group, and we, as I said, we've got an upcoming call, which is our second on annual planning and what that plan looks like.
We all get into just like week by week, and we get busy in the days, and your calendar fills up, and you're just looking to hit quotas, and so you ignore the need for that intentional slowing down, which I think still needs to happen throughout the months. There still needs to be that kind of reset, that accountability with sales manager. But as to what you were saying a few moments ago, this is the time. I mean, we're in January, February. This is the time I mean, the annual plan for a lot of companies has been completed. There's revenue goals in place. Now, how can sales look at that revenue goal and develop their sales strategy based off of that? We know
Mhm.
we know the growth that we're looking to expect. We know that maybe we're going to be bringing on a new hire and another sales rep in April. But what is the sales team's plan to be able to play a role in the overall kind of annual planning goals? This is the perfect time to be thinking about that.
There is. And when you think about these plans, again, the term you've heard about with any successful team, sports team, business team, you're hearing a lot about that right now, as a matter of fact, with the Super Bowl coming up.
Hmm.
Shared vision, if you've got people with different goals and different visions, I mean, talk about conflict.
Yeah.
That can kill a business. So for example, if I say one of my strategies would be, we will not pursue business, we will not accept business that is lower than X profit margin. If that's part of the strategy, and then you have a salesperson measured by volume, by number of leads, you have a development team that's getting anything. I mean, you don't have a shared vision.
Yeah.
A lot of conflict.
That is a lot of conflict. All right, lastly, have you had kind of a moment where you've seen a shift in a rep that you worked with, either with the Nolan Consulting Group and the Sales Accelerator program, or in your own sales coaching with your perceptive learning, or just kind of in your past sales coaching, where you've seen a rep make the shift, kind of think a little bit broader, or align their tactics with the company strategy, and it's changed their results?
Yeah, I think in my discussions through the accelerator program, that's probably what we jointly identified, is
Okay.
that some of the things that they are held accountable for don't really fit what's best for the company. It may be best for them. And so we have strategic discussions. I'll ask their cookbook, what they're measured by, how many calls, how many leads. I'll ask how they're supported. Do they get leads on their own? Do they have a team that's helping feed them with leads? I try to understand the whole background, but then we will have those discussions to try to find out if neighborhood dominance is one of the strategy. What's in their way of achieving that? What's their tactics? And if the company isn't supporting that, that's just some of the things that we've identified. And so our strategy joint is to confer with leadership, make sure that you all are on the same page. It's
Yeah.
important that you're on the same page. If you're being held accountable for something you don't expect to be measured by, it's just detrimental to the employment agreement period. And
Yeah.
and I'm not want to create conflict with an organization,
Hmm.
because it's easy just to continue to do things the way you've always done. It just doesn't require any thought. It's harder to think.
Yep.
But here, what we're trying to do is increase success of both the individual and the company. So
Yeah.
those
And
discussions have to occur.
yeah, and your job, I mean, your job as a sales coach, and whether it's a sales coach or a business coach, your job is to identify those gaps, to be able to see things that a rep or a business owner or a manager in the moment who's in it can't see. That's kind of the power of coaching and consulting, is to be able to kind of come in from a different perspective, a different view, see those holes, provide opportunities for improvement, kind of coach them through. If you weren't seeing those, then I think you wouldn't be doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You're coming in kind of looking to, there are gaps, and every company has gaps. Every company has opportunities for improvement. And so
Mhm.
often we're blinded, when you're in it. But that's where growth happens, when you can really
Well,
identify
it
where
is.
those gaps are.
It is. And the more you can eliminate the noise, the more effective you'll be. And it's just being very clear on what it is you want to achieve and how you're going to get there.
There's a lot of noise in this world. And it's fast-paced environment. So that is a challenge, to eliminate the noise and really understanding kind of the vision of what you're looking to achieve. Jeff, it's
Yeah.
always a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. You'll be one of our
Thank you.
co-facilitators of our upcoming Sales Fundamentals workshop here in March. We're excited to have you back. Any final words that you want to leave our listeners with?
None other than I recognize this is a hard topic. Strategy and
Yeah.
tactics is very, very difficult, and it's often not given the proper amount of attention. So
No, because it
I'm a
seems very
favor in doing it.
personal. Yeah, it seems very,
Mhm.
it's not just a one size fits all, is what I've kind of taken away from here. There's
Right.
obviously in general the need for a sales strategy, but it really comes down to each specific organization and the reps, and understanding kind of their role in all of it. So this is,
Yeah, and I guess one other thing is you can use ChatGPT and Gemini all day long to find out what strategies are, and the difference between strategy and tactics, and some example strategies. You can do that all day long, but giving life to it requires
yeah.
personnel, and it requires care, and a desire to think differently.
I love that you said that, because AI will never be able to replace the full human thought and the
No,
personality, and,
no,
the ability to actually connect, face to face on those bid opportunities, and get a lot of
yeah,
ideas, but it comes down to really the human being able to deploy them.
correct.
All right, Jeff. Well, until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you.